Hello dear friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel and this is our daily combat operations summary from the Ukrainian front. As of today, there are important changes in key sectors of the line of combat contact. However, we will move to the map itself a little later. To start, let's discuss the current news. It has become known that Volodymyr Zelensky has authorized a new operation on the territory of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you, there were previously two particularly high-profile operations. The first was the invasion of the Kursk region, when Ukrainian units entered the territory of the region and occupied Sudzha. The second was the so-called Operation Web, during which Ukrainian FPV drones struck deep in the rear at Russian aviation. And now, according to source information, Zelensky has given consent to launch yet another operation. For now, there are no details about it. If the operation proves successful, Kyiv will, of course, declare that it was prepared for a long time and is another carefully considered step accompanied by an information effect. If it ends in failure, the Ukrainian side will likely start claiming that all of this is just misinformation and that no one gave any authorization. In addition, over the last few days, Ukrainian sources have been actively writing about a possible Oreshnik strike. It is reported that such a strike could be carried out this week. Russian sources, in turn, are further escalating tensions and claiming that the Oreshnik could allegedly be used against Kyiv, that several such missiles will be launched specifically in the direction of the Ukrainian capital. Whether the Oreshnik will actually be deployed, we will find out very soon. And before we move to the main events at the front, as is tradition, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. I have noticed that recently viewers have become especially active in subscribing, and I am sincerely grateful to everyone who does so. Your subscription is truly serious support for the channel, because I do not ask for any donations and I do not announce any collections. The only help required from you is a subscription. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. Combat operations at the front continue, and you and I continue to carefully analyze the situation. So, where was progress recorded over the past day? Let's start with the sector of the East, Vostok grouping. Here, our fighters managed to take an extremely important step, starting an advance in the area of Dorozhnyanka along the railway tracks in a northerly direction. As you can see, movement along the railway allowed for an advance of almost 2 kilometers, approximately 1 kilometer 900 meters. Why is this advance so significant? Because the movement is in the direction of the southern outskirts of the urban-type settlement of Zaliznychne. Zaliznychne itself, at the moment, to speak plainly, is a serious problem and a real thorn in the side. Firstly, it is not a small village like something like Zelenoye. It is specifically an urban-type settlement. Secondly, there is an industrial zone there with permanent structures, which the AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, naturally use as fortified strongpoints. And thirdly, it is from Zaliznychne that Ukrainian forces are now daily, literally every day, undertaking assaults on Huliaipol, trying to gain a foothold in the western part of the city. Over the past day, for example, our fighters destroyed 36 enemy infantry, 4 armored combat vehicles, and 9 cars. Yes, this is slightly less than a day earlier. However, the decrease is due to the fact that the enemy failed to carry out a rotation. A group of Ukrainian military tried to replace their fellow soldiers, but Russian reconnaissance identified their movement in time. Then what was supposed to happen happened. A slaughter began. That is precisely why the capture of Zaliznychne is of extremely high importance. This is necessary, firstly, to secure Huliaipol from constant counterattacks, and secondly, to open the path for further advancement west toward Oriciv, which is currently the main priority target. At the same time, breaking through to Zaliznychne from the eastern side has not been successful yet. For about 3 weeks, the Russian army has been trying to advance in this direction, but for now they mostly have to repel AFU attacks. Yes, there were episodes when our units entered the outskirts of Zaliznychne, but they were unable to gain a foothold there. Therefore, the Russian army is now trying to reach this urban-type settlement from the southern direction. Yes, the distance remains quite significant, about 6 kilometers from current positions. But just a day ago, it was 8 kilometers. This means there really is progress. The movement has begun and the route is being established. Parallel to this, yesterday evening reports began to arrive about the activation of Russian units in the area of Mirna. The goal is to reach the Huliai-Pol-Omelnik highway and cut it, thereby ensuring the blocking of Zaliznikne. In such a case, the AFU garrison will find itself without supplies and without the possibility of normal rotation. Under such conditions, they will not be able to hold out for long. However, there is no objective control footage, visual confirmation for the Mirn area yet. That is to say, there is confirmation for the Dorozhnyanka area, which is why that section is already marked and colored on the map. But regarding Mirna, the situation remains without visual confirmation and awaits the appearance of objective control materials. Now let's move to the Oriciv direction. News continues to arrive from there and changes are being recorded. Yesterday we talked about how Russian troops are advancing in the direction of Oriciv, as well as expanding their control zone to the east of the Shcherbaki settlement. It was from these points that video materials were received confirming the presence of Russian forward positions and the expansion of control over the territory. Also yesterday, we noted that Russian troops will quite obviously straighten the front line between the settlements of Pavlovka and Malyir Shcherbaki. And there is a possibility that even now the line of contact is beginning to straighten between Pavlovka and Shcherbaki. In this way, the Russian army will gradually clear this territory. It can be said quite clearly that the supply road will eventually come under the control of Russian forces, and the entire zone up to this road will be completely cleared. To date, data has arrived stating that this territory has been cleared and that it has passed under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The entire territory marked in red is now under the full control of the Russian armed forces. Reports are also coming in that Russian units have managed to expand the control zone between the settlements of Primorsk and Stepnohursk. This section of the line of combat contact has also passed under the full control of the Russian armed forces at the current moment. And here I want to make a small clarification. The expansion of the control zone by Russian troops does not mean that forward positions are strictly at those points indicated on the map right now. They could be significantly further ahead, or they could be located slightly closer to the main line of combat contact and the main forces. The expansion of the control zone itself often means that Russian troops have knocked the AFU out of a certain area, occupied it, possibly gained a foothold, or perhaps just entered, conducted a clearing operation, and then pulled back. In such a case, the territory still passes under Russian control, while there is no need to constantly hold every single point directly on the front line. If the enemy has been successfully driven out and the sector cleared, units can pull back to avoid exposing personnel to unnecessary risk and to avoid putting the fighters in harm's way. Claims are also coming in that Russian troops are making substantial progress in the area of the Primorsk settlement, but no confirming materials on this matter have appeared yet. Yesterday, we also mentioned that some pro-Russian sources were reporting that Russian troops were already establishing positions in Rechna, launching strikes on Veselyanka and operating in the Malokaterynivka area. At the moment, it has been confirmed that sabotage and reconnaissance groups are indeed active in Malokaterynivka, are also operating in the area of Rechna, and strikes are simultaneously being delivered against AFU positions in the area of Veselyanka. No confirmed expansion of the control zone has been recorded yet, but despite this, pro-Russian mapping services have effectively colored this entire territory, including almost all of Primorsk, in favor of the Russian army. As soon as confirming information appears, I will certainly tell you about everything in detail. Regarding Novoyakovlivka, Novoboykivske, Magdalinovka and Zapasne, no advance of the Russian army is currently recorded in these sectors. Nevertheless, it is reported that Novoyakovlivka is largely in the grey zone, and Novoboykivske also remains in the grey zone and is not controlled by Ukrainian units. Russian troops entered these settlements, but were then forced to pull back slightly to conduct a rotation, and pressure now continues in the direction of Magdalinovka and Zapasne. At the same time, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has not yet declared that Novoyakovlivka has come under the full control of Russian forces. Earlier reports suggested that Novoboykivske, Novoyakovlivka and Pavlovka had supposedly already passed under the control of the Russian armed forces, but full control has not been officially announced yet. We now move to the Pocrosk direction. Truly important reports are coming from here, and there are also new changes on the map. Speaking specifically of the map adjustments, Yesterday, we discussed that Russian units had advanced in this sector of the line of combat contact, and the entire territory highlighted in red passed under the full control of Russian troops over the past day. Today, 2 video clips arrived from the specified points, confirming the further development of the situation. Russian sources report the following. The Russian armed forces are conducting an attack with infantry units in Grishino. Assault groups are taking up new positions, operating under enemy fire. Russian troops are advancing toward the center of Grishino by more than 1 kilometer and are expanding the control zone within the residential area of the settlement. Let me remind you that just yesterday we mentioned that Russian forces had previously been recorded in the area of Solnechny Lane. Here is that section, and today confirming materials have arrived. It is worth noting that similar reports appeared several weeks ago. Back then, it was stated that Russian troops were already present in the central part of this settlement. Information also arrived regarding a substantial advance along Lenin Street. However, for a long period, there were no confirming materials from this direction. Now such confirmations have appeared. The entire territory marked in red has come under the full control of Russian forces as of today. An advance by Russian units is recorded here, and data is also arriving indicating that the control zone may in reality be even wider in favor of the Russian army. It is quite possible that serious changes await us in this sector in the near future. The AFU, despite increasing pressure, continue to undertake counterattacks with small assault groups. However, judging by the development of events, the Ukrainian side is failing to achieve any serious success, as Russian troops continue their advance and maintain the initiative on this stretch of the line of contact. Now let's move to the Doorbilia protrusion. News is also arriving here that Russian units have managed to significantly expand the control zone in the direction of the Novyi Donbass settlement. Additionally, strikes are reported on AFU positions in Belitske, Doorbilia, Volne, and Steppe. The settlements of Toretske and Pavlovka are also under attack. Regarding the advance of Russian forces, information is coming in that Russian troops have expanded the control zone in the area of Novishakov, in the direction of the Novyi Donbass settlement, and also in the direction of the Belitske settlement. Yesterday we colored the map in exactly this way, and today confirming materials arrived directly from this section of the line of combat contact. The entire territory highlighted in red has currently passed under the full control of Russia. Reaching the Novyi Donbass settlement provides Russian troops with the opportunity to cut the supply road leading to Belitske, take physical control of it, and then move along this supply line directly toward Belitske. Data is also arriving that Russian units are expanding the control zone from the direction of the Rodinska settlement, as well as from the direction of the Suketska settlement. However, it is important to emphasize, Suketska is currently mostly in the grey zone, as is the Suvero settlement. Fighters have reported that Suvero and Suketska are effectively changing hands. At one moment, the Ukrainian side maintains control, then the situation changes in favor of the Russian side. Encounter battles take place here daily, so both settlements remain contested and are in a zone of active confrontation. If they finally pass under Russian control, then a direct path to Belitske will, of course, open up for Russian troops. For now, strikes against Belitske continue with the use of FPV drones and artillery. As of today, this is how the situation looks in this sector. Furthermore, Russian units have managed to approach Kucheriv Yar once again. For now, this is not about reaching the village itself, but about advancing to the road in the area of the quarry. What does this indicate? This indicates that all attempts by the Ukrainian side to carry out counterattacks on the Doorbilia protrusion will ultimately lead to a zero result for the AFU. At this moment, out of all their successes, effectively only 2 settlements that they were able to recapture remain: Kucheriv Yar and Zolotoy Kolodez. Although it should be clarified, the Russian army never fully controlled Zolotoy Kolodez, so effectively we are talking not even about 2 settlements, but about roughly 1.5. And that is it. Moreover, Russian troops are again approaching Kucheriv Yar closer and closer, and I personally have no doubt that control over this village will be established in the near future. The picture for the AFU here is quite typical. At some point, they may achieve local success, but they are incapable of holding captured positions over the long term. This was the case during the 2023 offensive, when all recaptured positions were eventually lost. The same happened in the Kursk region. The Ukrainian side ultimately lost all occupied positions. In the Pocrosk area, Ukrainian troops went on the offensive in early 2025, and the positions they managed to recapture were also subsequently lost. And now, in the Doorbilia sector, the exact same scenario is being observed. Practically everything that they managed to temporarily recapture has already been lost again. Meanwhile, Russian advancement in the Doorbilia direction, judging by the dynamics, will only intensify. Moving on. Another advance of Russian units was recorded in Kostantinivka. At the same time, for some reason, mapping services have not yet colored this section. I don't know, perhaps they simply missed this point, although the advance is confirmed by objective control footage. Specifically, footage has appeared showing Russian assault troops on Yesenin Street, in this area. That is to say, even now we can speak of the presence of Russian assault groups directly within Kostantinivka. I believe that map makers will eventually make the corresponding changes to the map today. Well, tomorrow we will analyze the situation in Kostantinivka in more detail to visually show what is happening on the map and discuss exactly what is developing there. For now, I am simply giving you this information so that you understand. There was an advance here too, and successes are also being recorded here. The AFU in Kostantinivka are gradually being pushed back. But we will speak more specifically and in detail about this in tomorrow's episode. As for today, that is all I have on the general situation at the front.